Hi there. Today we're going to explore the plot of the 2022 film, The Princess. The young princess woke up on the top floor of a tall tower with shackles on her wrists. She barely remembered what had happened that night, but she was determined to escape. Hearing footsteps, the girl pretended to be asleep. Two men entered the room, and one of them tried to touch her. The princess headbutted the attacker, freed one of her hands from the shackle, and used the other to hit the second guard. Enraged, he threw her to the floor. The girl pulled a hairpin from her hair and drove it toward the enemy's face, until he lost consciousness. Her long dress made fighting harder. The second soldier struck her across the face, which earned him a flurry of hairpin strikes and a blow with the shackles. She hit his knee with a baton. Another guard ran in when he heard the commotion. The princess struck him with a hammer and laid his unconscious body in her bed. Her new goal: reach the ground floor. Looking out the window, she saw the invaders forcing her family to kneel. The enemies had locked down the castle so no one could escape. Power in the kingdom was being seized by the son of a diplomat, Julius. To legitimize his claim, he planned to marry the princess. He was aided by the warrior Moira. Julius was annoyed with the too-soft king, who had offered refuge to foreigners instead of conquering their lands. The princess realized this was all her fault. The day before, she was supposed to marry Julius, and he would have become ruler after the king's death. But at the last moment, she changed her mind and fled. A burly soldier wearing a horned helmet entered the washroom. While he was distracted, the girl hid underwater in the bath. But he lingered, and the princess nearly drowned. She tore off part of her dress and slipped into the corridor. Unfortunately, a guard saw her and grabbed her by the throat. Attacking such a giant was pointless. She'd only hurt herself. He wielded a long sword but was slow, and the girl used that to her advantage. When he lost the sword, he charged at her with his horns. The princess leapt onto his shoulders, removed his helmet, and drove one of the horns into him. Thus, the giant was defeated. Since childhood, she had been trained in kung fu by a migrant woman from China, even though the king opposed such training. A soldier was pulled from the river. Julius suspected that a people's avenger had appeared in the castle, so he ordered a check on the princess's condition. To do so, the fittest guard was sent to the top of the tower. Meanwhile, the princess was recovering after the fight. She had torn off her skirt and sleeves, which restricted her movement. Two more soldiers entered the room. She stabbed one with a broken stick and tied the other to a beam with rope. They refused to answer her questions, so she had to use a crossbow. Noticing more troops running up the stairs, the princess lowered herself out the window to avoid being seen. It seemed like the danger had passed, but a massive guard sat down to rest right next to the window. Because of him, she had to hang over the abyss even longer. In the throne room, enemy soldiers were looting and drinking. The princess quietly slipped past them and made her way to her bedroom. She needed a special sword. Despite her father's prohibitions, the girl had continued practicing martial arts. She was trained by Lin and her uncle Kai, the king's advisor. It was Kai who gave her that sword. The princess swapped her shoes for boots and once again disappeared into a secret servant passage. The woman with the whip wasn't just a mercenary. She was also Julius's lover. The usurper was planning to eliminate the old king right after taking the throne. As the two began to embrace, the princess tried to strike them through the wall, but they got distracted. Meanwhile, the burly guard had reached the top floor and peeked into the bedroom. Everything seemed calm. The princess was sleeping under guard. But in truth, she had already slipped into the next room. The girl was startled by a knight in golden armor, but it seemed to be just a suit. This giant wielded an even bigger sword than the last opponent. He began swinging it, destroying everything around him. The armor was too strong to pierce, but the princess found its weak spots, under the armpits and at the lower torso. The knight was wounded, but still kept swinging his sword, so the girl smashed an oil jar over him and set the giant ablaze. Meanwhile, the guard had descended. Julius ordered every floor to be searched, and the princess captured at any cost. One of the commanders yelled at Julius's lover. She didn't hesitate, and took him down with her whip. An entire army stormed the tower. From above, airborne acrobats attacked the princess. They wounded her, which cost two of them their lives. She dealt with the first large group of enemies by scattering a necklace on the floor. The crowd slipped, and the girl ran across their shields. One acrobat was less lucky. The princess cut his rope and left him hanging upside down. More attackers kept coming. A tough brute with a hammer continued crushing her. She had to finish him off with a precise blow to the head. The situation became critical. The princess was surrounded on all sides. Only one thing saved her: the order to take her alive. Cornered, the girl leapt onto a soldier and fell 5 floors down with him. One of the acrobats tried to copy the move. At that moment, a wounded guard passed by, not noticing the princess. She was surrounded again, so she had to jump out the window, grabbing onto a flag. She ran along the wall and crashed into one of the bedrooms. The princess was injured. She needed to hide and bandage her wounds. She recalled a conversation with her parents. The king had no male heirs, so he was forced to marry off his daughter to Julius. Her father had hoped that the princess would find the strength to marry Julius, but she thought otherwise. Lin entered the room. The Chinese woman had a special healing ointment. It would help her student recover quickly. Lin told her that the night before, Julius had destroyed nearly the entire royal guard. Only she and a few others survived. The plan was to escape through the sewers, but they could only be accessed through the kitchen. There, a group of guards was running wild. They had grabbed a cook and pinned her to the wall. Luckily, the girl had someone to stand up for her. Even cabbage didn't help the invaders. The battle sisters gave them a good beating and forced them to flee. But just then Moira burst into the kitchen. With her whip, she dislocated Lin's shoulder and hung the princess from the ceiling. With great effort, the girls managed to fight back. Lin ordered the princess to escape through the sewers, staying behind to hold off Moira. The princess dove into the wastewater and made her way to the dungeon where her family was being held. They were guarded by 3 drunk soldiers. The princess pretended to drink too and without much trouble took them out. Her father couldn't believe his daughter was capable of acting so cold-bloodedly, but right after that the princess was knocked out and woke up in the throne room. Lin had also been captured. Julius reached for her face and nearly lost his fingers. The usurper still planned to marry the princess, but she promised to make his life a living nightmare. That didn't suit Julius, so he decided to take her sister Violet as his wife instead. At that moment, the princess distracted everyone, and Lin grabbed Violet and escaped the hall. Meanwhile, the main heroine was violently thrown out the window. She fell from a great height into the water, sinking like a stone. But memories brought her back to consciousness. The princess cut the rope on a piece of debris at the bottom and surfaced. Julius ordered the wedding ceremony to be prepared immediately, but first he needed to find the bride, Violet. Now the princess was after the same goal. On her way, she encountered another mini-boss, but this time it was Violet who neutralized him, dropping a suit of armor onto the giant. The 3 of them descended into the secret armory. While the soldiers were turning the entire castle upside down, the warrior girls suited up in leather armor. The princess took up her sword, and Lin, her special bow. Violet wasn't ready to fight yet, so her main task was to hide well. Julius was already prepared to torture the queen so she would call for her younger daughter. But then the sounds of battle rang out from outside. This princess keeps refusing to die, and not even an army can stop her, especially with Lin and her miracle bow by her side. And Violet couldn't just sit still. She made her way to the prisoners and cut the ropes binding Kai's hands. The girls were immediately surrounded by heavily armed knights, but the experienced princess already knew exactly where to strike. Julius finally finds Violet. He intends to marry this young girl. Meanwhile, the combat duo of the princess and Lin is wreaking havoc in the enemy ranks. Half of the opponents fall under their blows. The last to lose balance is an archer. Lin takes care of the guards inside the castle. Her uncle comes to help her. At the same time, Moira finally decides to finish off the princess. As always, she uses her whip. The king tries to take the sword from Julius, but Julius stabs him in the stomach. During the clash, the princess loses her sword, but she closes the distance and uses Moira's own weapon against her, tames her with her whip, and neutralizes the enemy. At this moment, Lin is defeated in her own fight. Julius seriously injures the Chinese woman, and she collapses to the floor. A satisfied Julius puts the crown on his head and prepares to fight his former bride. Julius turns out to be not only strong, but also cunning. She defends herself with the last of her strength until the villain knocks the sword from her hands. He brings the girl to her knees, as if she were bowing before the new king. Julius intends to rule through strength and fear, and to prove it, he wants to eliminate the princess right then and there. But suddenly the king distracts Julius. The princess seizes the moment and eliminates the usurper herself. The king reclaims his crown and declares that he no longer needs any heirs. Better, for the first time in history, a woman shall become the ruler, especially since she is capable of defeating an entire army on her own. The miracle ointment from China gets Lin back on her feet within minutes, and she personally congratulates her student. And at last, the guard completes his mission. He finds the runaway princess. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this recap, give it a like, leave a comment, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel.